Let's start with one of our top stories. One of late soccer star Senzo Meyiwa's close friends, Mthokozisi Thwala, had another difficult day on the stand. Thwala was under cross-examination about what happened in the house the night Meyiwa died. He had a tough time explaining questions on the language spoken by the apparent intruders, as well as, of course, yesterday we saw proceedings being adjourned because there was no interpreter. Let's now get the latest with SABC News reporter Ofentse Setimo, who's been tracking developments for us in court. Ofentse, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. A long time spent on the language that Thwalas said the intruders spoke. Why was this important?
Well, I can tell you, thank you very much, Bongi. Judge Chifiwa Maumela had a day where he was basically intervening a lot between exchanges between advocate Charles Mnisi and also Mthokozisi Thwala. This, as you know, Mnisi was actually trying to pressure Thwala to a point where he might contradict statements of which he had made to the police earlier. You know, he referred to statements that Thwala actually made in 2014, saying that, you know, at some point he had mentioned that the firearm that the intruder was using on the fateful night on which Meyiwa was actually gunned down was an old revolver, to which Mthokozisi actually replied saying that no, he doesn't even know what a revolver actually looks like, so there's no way he would have actually described it that way. Then at some point the advocate actually pressed him saying that, you know, maybe there's a possibility that you told the investigating officer that this is what was transpiring, but because of the duration and the period at which you had told the investigating officer what had happened, you might have forgotten. He replied saying that maybe I had not told the investigating officer about that particular aspect of the evidence and they decided to just write it in. You know, this is one of the aspects where the advocate was actually at loggerheads with Mthokozisi Thwala, but one thing that we observed was that Thwala actually stuck to his guns, you know, mentioning the issue of Sotho and Zulu. The advocate actually asked him to say that you said that the intruder, when he was requesting your belongings, with his firearm and everything, he spoke in English, but you were saying that he could have been a Zulu or a Sotho speaker. Why was that the case? Why would you have said that he was a Sotho speaker? Then Thwala actually said that no, it might have been an issue of pronunciation. He didn't actually speak in any of the vernacular languages. He spoke in English. He said money and cell phones. But based on the way he was pronouncing the words, Thwala assumed that it might be a Sotho or a Zulu speaker, but to a certain extent he concluded that it could have been a Zulu speaker. Then at some point the advocate also mentioned that, you know, just because to a certain extent he felt that Thwala was not actually answering to his satisfaction, then he mentioned that Zandile, who's the sister to Kelly Khumalo, and also Chico Thwala's son Longwe would actually come to court to testify, and to a certain extent they might contradict what he's saying. And he said that no, that is Mthokozisi actually said that he does not have a problem with what they will have testified, because that's what they will have seen when the scenes were actually transpiring. And a lot of time was also spent on the fact that when the gunmen approached them when they were at the sitting room and requesting their cell phones, their belongings and their cash, at some point Longe Thwala stood up, pushed the intruder to the side and ran out. But now right there, immediately afterwards, the witness was saying that Meyiwa got into a scuffle or a pushing, wrestling with basically the person who was intruding, and they pushed each other towards the kitchen. But now the advocate wanted him to specifically explain the pushing itself, who was grabbing who, where, how were they locked with each other, and what exactly was happening, to which Mthokozisi said that he cannot explain exactly what happened, as this happened a long time ago, to which the advocate got a bit agitated, saying that Mthokozisi would make the work of the state very difficult as he's evading some of the questions, Bongi.
And let's take then a listen to some of what came out in court, particularly on the first point that you and I made around the language issue.
Initially, my question was, why do you say that in what this person said, there was a Sotho, there was some Sotho? Which word you use in your main testimony?
Discussing a statement
I reset ukuthi lo muntu ufune imali nge-cell phone, and I cleared ukuthi imali nge-cell phone is an English word.
During the time of the writing of my statement, I mentioned, or I did say that this person demanded money and cell phone, and I made it specific that money and cell phones is English.
But engikushoyo ukuthi ngoba kangasiyena umuntu omhlophe lo ayengibuza lokho kakumuntu omnyama.
Because the person who was asking me that was not a white person, was a black person.
So that's why ngisho ukuthi lo muntu wakusho ngesizulu, ngasho ukuthi mhlawumbe hayi ukuthi umsuthi, but ngoba manje ngixaka ukuthi indaba mhlawumbe ngoba ngithe-gold angisho kanjalo, but it was towards isizulu kakhulu.
Okay.
So statement kusibhalwe kanjalo.
Now what I then mentioned or said that let me just say this, because we are now in Gauteng, I would then say in isiZulu, and even in my statement it's written like that.
And just before I bring you back in, Ofentse, let's also listen to what he had to say about the scaffold itself, because there is, questions about whether or not he's cracking as a witness, as the defense is trying to poke holes. Let's listen in before we come back to you.
You're saying there was a scaffold that was happening between Senzo and Mr. Madlala, the first intruder and the second intruder, not so.
Uyaphinda ke futhi uyasho-ke ukuthi kwakunalesi scaffold esiphakathi kukaSenzo uTumelo lona owangena qala nalona owesibili.
Yes. Now I want you to explain exactly that which you saw, which was happening, that which you're referring to as a scaffold, even before you could concentrate on the child. Ngiyacabanga ukuthi ngeke ngize ngichaze exactly ukuthi kwenzakalani. Waphela ngiyasho ukuthi khona abantu abawu-6 phambi kwami. La abawu-4 othi angibachaze wena bangale ngasekuqaleni. La abawu-2 bangala besifazane. So ngeke ngize ngibone exactly into ayenzeka ukuthi ubani wayebambe kuphi ubani wayenzani, but kakune-scaffold between la abantu abawu-4 ngibashoyo ngoba le 2 iyayishaya lo owayesinizibhamu kakhulu ngoba uyena wayengala.
I think that I won't be able to tell you exactly or to explain exactly as to what it is that was happening there, because I'm mentioning to you that there were 6 people. The 4 were on the other side, and I won't be able to say who was holding who, where, and what was exactly happening. And the 2 were on this side, that is now on my side, and assaulting the one that was carrying the firearm.
And Ofentse, just listening to that and some of what he had to say throughout the day, it sounds like he's, he doesn't want to be drawn to other people's versions, but at the same time sticking to his guns, and thus making it difficult to get him to crack, essentially.
Absolutely, Bongi. In fact, at some point, Advocate Charles Mnisi put it to him to say that he's actually making the prosecution's work very difficult, because sometimes he would say, no, I'm not willing to answer that question because that's the statement made by Zandi or that's a statement made by whoever, of which eventually, because, there was such an impasse whenever the advocate's answers, whenever the advocate's questions were not answered to his satisfaction, he would to a certain extent, interject and disrupt, up until Judge Maumela would actually interject and put it to him that it's a bit of a habit that he's picked up, that ever since the case began today, whenever the witness would not answer to his satisfaction, or when the witness would say, I'm not willing to comment on that, then it would be an issue where now the advocate would put it to the witness that according to court procedures, you're just supposed to answer yes or no. And in fact, there would be some people who would be coming to either corroborate or to discredit what you are saying. So it was a bit of a sparring match between the witness himself and the advocate who was actually representing accused number 3 in this particular matter.
All right, let's see then what happens tomorrow. Ofentse, thank you so much for wrapping the day's proceedings for us. That's our reporter, Ofentse Setimo, giving us a sense of what happened in court. And of course, there is still quite a long way to go when it comes to cross-examination. Remember, there is still the lawyer, advocate, Zandile Mshololo, who still has to have his turn just before Mthokozisi can then go for re-examination. But we'll watch that closely for you.